little something prepared from earlier. In the proposition tonight, I will be arguing that forced use for equality and forced use for supremacy is equally immoral. The spirit of the proposition is that while we agree that political and economic systems such as fascism and Nazism are immoral, what is strange to me is that other systems such as socialism or communism are viewed as good in theory but bad in practice. I would like to argue that if the core philosophical concepts in these systems lead to mass acts of immorality such as violence, torture, forced starvations, and purges, then it should be the case that these philosophical concepts are themselves immoral. For reference, socialism is the political and economic theory of social organization which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. Communism is a theory or system of social organization in which property is owned by the community and each person contributes and receives according to their ability and needs. Fascism is a governmental system with strong centralized power, permitting no opposition or criticism, controlling all affairs of the nation, industrial, commercial, etc., emphasizing an aggressive nationalism. Nazism is the political principles of the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Nazism is a form of fascism with an emphasis on racial supremacy. That's me.
Oh, thanks. I'm taking the negation of this proposition, that these immoralities are not equal. And the framing here is sort of comparing like socialism, communism, Russia, we could say, USSR, versus like Nazi Germany and the Holocaust. And the idea being that the policies in communist Russia entail, and I'm using entail in the logical sense as in necessarily follows, that there's going to be these things like purges and millions of people dying. And when we compare those millions of people dying from a system like communism with a system like Nazism, which explicitly has supremacy as one of its values and the eradication of certain ethnicities as being an entailment of those values, the claim is that these consequences are the same, the reasons for the consequences are the same, and therefore they're equally immoral. So it's my position that that's an incorrect framing, it's inaccurate, and even if it was the right framing, it would also still be wrong. So, for example, we could think of equality here, force of equality being the state taking action to redistribute wealth in a certain way. That wealth being redistributed doesn't entail, and I mean that in the logical sense, doesn't necessarily follow that people will die. However, when we take something like one race is superior to another race, and that race that is inferior being part of our society weakens our society, then it does seem to necessarily follow that those people would be eradicated from that society. And you might say, well, that doesn't mean that they will kill them. They could just be pushed out to another country. But there aren't really any better options of moving people in a mass way. And we can see historically that every time a nation or state has forcibly moved a group of people, that culture has either been destroyed or the people killed. So it seems to me like we can say it's entailed that supremacy, specifically a racial supremacy, does entail death, but the equality between people's citizens or a state's citizens does not entail this massive death. And on that alone, we can then say that the death is more immoral than something that doesn't entail the death. And to me, it's just a simple like, one entails death, one does not entail death. The one that entails death is more immoral than the other. And that's it.
So I disagree that the racial system entails death if it doesn't use a lot of force. But the spirit of the argument that I wanted to discuss today is more the fact of the matter. Like, these systems have done this, and therefore,
Well, that's not the proposition. The proposition is force used for X, force used for Y is equally immoral, right? When we're talking about something being immoral, we're saying something like what we ought do. Now, we're not just talking about historically what happened here when we say immoral. We're talking about these forces used, meaning if we applied it right now, or we applied it in a possible world, are they equal? Basically, what I'm saying is the framing of it only being about history, I think, is going to leave out what it means to say something is immoral, because we're also making a prescription with that statement.
No, not necessarily. What I'm saying is this. I'm saying that these systems of governance or ethics, to some degree, like had ethics in them, led to these results. And as a consequence, we said that these systems are, or let's say in the case of Nazism, we said that this is immoral. It led to these results. And this other system also led to really bad results, but we're not saying that it is immoral because we are either, well, there could be a bunch of reasons, but we're not saying that the system itself is immoral. We're saying something got wrong along the way. As I mentioned, and it was stated on this server, that the theory is good that the system is good in theory but bad in practice, meaning there's a disconnect between the moral theory itself and the application of it. And I would just like to have a discussion to investigate why is there that disconnect, whereas on the other side there is not that disconnect.
Right. I mean, that's the question of entailment, right? Like, basically what's happening here is there has to be some kind of causal explanation from this set of beliefs causing this outcome. When it comes to the economic theory of socialism, that does not have a causal chain to the mass death, but there is a causal chain to mass death from racial supremacy and authoritarian governments. You can have socialism without an authoritarian government, but racial supremacy is the kind of thing that is enforced via this authoritarian government. So it seems to me like,
well,
the causal story is stronger in the case of racial supremacy versus the causal story of the economics from socialism.
Well, I would disagree. I would say that socialism, to do it properly, would entail an authoritarian government. But let's take your point. Say that socialism doesn't have to have authoritarian government. Then, Nazism and fascism doesn't have to have an authoritarian government, in the case of Nazism at the very least, where you can just have like a racist ideology, but no force is applied on the other races.
But that utterly changes the nature of Nazism. To the point of no longer being Nazism.
I would argue the same. I would argue the same for socialism.
No, that's where you and I disagree, because you're defining socialism as being a state power, but socialism, as defined in the tradition of socialist, is the workers owning the means of production. That does not require a state to do that. You can do that in a libertarian anarchist system.
You would require force to apply that.
Not necessarily.
Absolutely necessarily. People won't give up their property.
Okay, when you say necessarily, that means that there's no possible world where that happens, right? So when I say not necessarily, I mean we can imagine a possible world where people give up their property so that they can have a socialist economy.
And we can imagine a possible world where people give up their, individual rights to a fascist government, but no force is used on minorities.
Before we get to that, do you agree that it is not a case of necessity here? Do you at least grant that it's possible socialism can be done voluntarily?
On a scale of a country, or on a scale of like 200 people?
Let's just start with 200 people.
It probably could be done voluntarily, yes.
Okay, great. And when we're talking about Nazism, All right. So these are the things that are being compared, right? So there's socialism, which I'm defining simply as workers own the means of production. And then there's Nazism, Nazism being the flavor of what Hitler brought about. That by definition is this powerful state. That's how it got to become what it was. The whole point of Nazism under Hitler was this strong state, was to resuscitate the German identity. Part of its nature is this strong state with a racial supremacy. If you take it, those are necessary.
This is the point. So let me just understand correctly.
Okay.
Let me see if I understand your point. So you're saying that because socialism doesn't need a state, even though there are centrally planned mechanisms in there that can or cannot be part of the state, but there are centrally planned mechanisms, and there is, as far as I can see it, the use of force to confiscate property. You're saying because of the element of the state, then it can potentially not be authoritarian, whereas Nazism, because it uses state, has to be authoritarian.
No, it's not a potential case with socialism. I think there are actual examples of socialism where it's not the type of force that Nazism has. I mean, there is coercion, right? And we can maybe catch that out as a kind of force. But let me address a point here before you respond to that. When we're talking about socialism and Nazism here, all I'm really pointing out are what are the necessary and sufficient conditions for each. When I talk about a necessary and sufficient condition for socialism, all I have to say is workers own the means of production. When I talk about a necessary sufficient condition for Nazism, that has to include this authoritarian government plus racial supremacy.
You have the necessity for fascism, at the least, is a governmental system with strong centralized power.
Yes, and Nazism is a flavor of fascism that includes this racial supremacy.
Yes.
Okay, so just so it's clear, the necessary
it isn't clear.
Conditions.
It isn't clear.
Good.
Sorry. It isn't clear that even though there is this racial supremacy, that as a result of this, people may die by default. That is not clear. Just by the phrasing.
Okay, I can grant just by the phrasing, it's not clear. And I can also grant that there might be some possible world, right, where there is this racist government and they never kill people. They just happen to have these racist values and somehow they're able to inhibit destruction of this race.
Can I ask though, I would prefer that the conversation be not around like, do we have like these extreme possibilities where something may or may not happen? I would prefer to go, this is what happened in the past. This is what I think went wrong. And this is why I think the concept doesn't connect to what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can get into that, but I just want to make sure it's clear what we're cashing out here, because there's a modern day example of socialism that is not resulting in mass death of people. But I can't think of a modern day example of Nazism where there isn't going to be violence towards people of an ethnicity.
But you can think of a modern day fascism or close to it, which doesn't lead to mass death.
No, I can't. Because I mean, in my view, all authoritarian governments lead to mass death, including the United States, which I think has authoritarianism as part of its function. I mean, we can see the mass death from the United States in places like Iraq, where something like 250,000 civilians were killed. We've killed more civilians in Afghanistan than the Taliban has.
Okay, sure.
So, I mean, in my mind...
Sorry, are you saying that the United States is authoritarian? Is that what you're saying?
I think the United States is authoritarian.
Sorry, you're saying authoritarian and fascist?
I think it has fascistic elements, but I wouldn't call it fascist yet.
Fascistic elements, got it, okay.
Yeah, but I don't consider the U.S. fascist.
Well,
I mean, I think in my mind, a fascist government is also isolationist. It's not a globalist country, but the United States is quite globalist. So that alone, I think, makes it not fascist. But I do consider a lot of what the U.S. does as totalitarian.
Well, it's going to be an interesting conversation.
Right. So let me point out an example of what I think is a socialist policy that does not result in death.
Sure.
In the United Kingdom, I'm sure you might even be familiar with this law.
Mhm.
When a company wants to move out of the United Kingdom, that the workers get first right of refusal. Basically, they have the right to buy the company from the owners.
Is this
And
a theoretical law or an actual law?
as far as I know, it's an actual law.
It is not an
And
actual law. It was a proposed law.
okay, well, I might be mistaken about that, but my understanding was it was an actual law.
No, it was suggested by Jeremy Corbyn had he won his election. And in addition to the law, Jeremy Corbyn also suggested that if the workers don't have money to buy the company, that the government will lend it to them.
Yes, okay, great. That's the same law. Okay, this law where the workers, it doesn't have to be a real law, right? It can be a theoretical law. This law where the workers can buy the company from the owners and get a subsidized loan from the government and pay that loan back to the government, that's an example of socialism.
An example of socialism could be someone opening their own company or two people opening their own company.
It depends on how it's getting opened, in my
Well,
mind. I wouldn't consider a capitalist
work,
opening a company. If they open a co-op, sure. Yeah, they open a co-op, it's socialism.
If two people open a company and they both work there and they're the only workers, that counts as socialism as well.
It could. But it's not necessarily the case that it's socialist. In this case, I do think it's necessarily the case that it's socialist.
Oh, okay. So if we're looking at such a loose definition, I can also come up with example like a self-employed person, working out of a van is socialism because he owns the company. Even if he shares it with 3 other people and they all get equal shares, it's still socialism. But I think this is like it's like missing the point completely of unless this leads to something else, then fine.
No, I mean, it's not missing the point because we have to make sure that we're cashing out socialism correctly in order to say it is equally as immoral as force for supremacy.
Why don't we instead say, here is the USSR, here's Mao's China, here's Pol Pot's Cambodia, and said this is what it is. These are the elements inside of it, and how they're not necessarily connected to communism or socialism.
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean. Are you saying like we need to look at Soviet Russia and say that this policy in Soviet Russia is socialism, and this policy brought about famine?
No. I'm basically trying to do this. I'm basically trying to say what happened. Yeah. So we had this major event in history occurred, and all these people died. A lot. Well, I'm assuming we're in agreement here. And
yeah, I do agree that Soviet Russia and China killed millions of people.
Sure, great. And why did it happen? Why? What were the philosophical elements? What were the psychological? Let's stick with philosophical, but we can also do psychological elements but like broadly speaking, that led us to this point.
Mm-hmm.
And then we say, well, these things are not connected at all to the core theory because of X. Whereas these things are connected to the core theory, and it must happen all the time.
What do you mean by connected? When you say connected to these theories, obviously socialism is connected to Soviet Russia, right? But when I hear you say connect, I think you're trying to say something stronger. I think you're trying to say something like they causally motivated these things, that they're entailed. So to me, it's not so much a question of like, are they connected? Because that seems a little broad, but is it a causal?
Let me explain in a different way. See if you agree with this, right?
Okay.
Using very broad terms. Actually, I should have got some water. Damn it. Let's say very broad terms. Let's say we as humans observe reality. We as humans form concepts from reality. We as humans form ethics from those concepts. And we say this is an ethical way to live our life. And then we follow these ethics based on these concepts, and something really bad happened in reality. Right? Then I could say, well, maybe we didn't understand reality because all these really bad things happen. Maybe it's a bad concept, maybe it's a bad ethic, because it led to all these bad outcomes. That's essentially what I'm saying, broadly speaking.
I'm not quite following what you mean by we didn't understand reality.
Mm-hmm.
you say that the ethics led to something bad?
So we have reality, right? Us as humans,
Mhm.
we're observing reality. We're forming concepts, abstractions from reality, and we're forming concepts based on those abstractions, right? I think even with different philosophies than you and I think that's roughly correct to say, right?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by
it doesn't really matter. We don't have to get pedantic about it.
It's
Again,
not pedantic. It's trying to pick out the meaning.
Sure.
Like I'm not just sitting here trying to play on words. Like I literally don't understand what you mean when you say there's reality and we have abstractions about reality. Like to me, it seems like we understand reality through abstractions. Let me give you an example about the speed of light. For example, we don't know the one-way speed of light. We only know the round trip speed of light. We fire a laser at a mirror, it comes back. We divide that speed by 2, and we assume it's traveling at the same rate both there and back. We assume it's traveling at the same rate there and back, and then we find the speed of light. Would you say the speed of light is something about reality that we understand about reality?
Let me rephrase. So I just need to like convey the general theme, because I'm just trying to explain how I'm seeing it, and that's why I think that's why I'm raising the proposition. And you can say, well, there's a disconnect here and it's not the same. Fine. So basically, again, we have reality. We're anchored to it. Like we are part of reality, and we see patterns in reality. We see things in reality, like we see 3 or 4 different chairs, and we say, oh, I'm forming the concept of a chair, an abstraction of 4 chairs into just chairness or something like that. And then let's say higher level above than these concepts, we form an ethic. Just again, broadly speaking, it's not exactly how it happens, but we're forming like another high level concept, which is an ethic, saying this is how we should live our life. Obviously, I jumped a few points here, but like roughly.
Yeah, I guess where I disagree is I think we start from the ethical and we move to reality, rather than starting from reality and move to the ethical.
Ethics should change reality?
No, not should. I think this is a description of how I think we do science and how I think we understand the world.
Okay.
We have norms about how we cash out reality. Those norms are ethical. We ought cash reality out this way versus we ought not cash out reality this way. We discover reality through normativity. So in my view, we start from normativity and discover reality through it. But on your view, you have reality first and we discover ethics through reality.
Yeah, in my view, reality is the anchor point. And then we form abstractions, we form concepts, we form based on reality. For example, like if we want to obtain certain values, then we need to do these things. That's an ethic. But even if from your point of view, you say, well, we have the ethic.
It's totally flipped for me.
Fine. But so let's say we have an ethic and we apply it to reality, and let's say in a pragmatic experiment, and as a result of taking this ethic and applying it to reality, we got X as a result, which was very bad. So I'm just saying that in this kind of, I suppose, causal link, that it could be the case, at the very least, it's a possibility that the ethic was the problem, right? And you could say, well, no, the ethic isn't the problem. Something in the middle went wrong, and it wasn't implemented correctly. Therefore, the ethic is right. But
I can agree. It's possible that that our norm is incorrect, right? Like that doesn't seem to me controversial at all to say, yeah, we might have the wrong norm here. Okay, so, but that doesn't give us an answer for the question about force of equality versus force for supremacy being equally immoral here, right? It's possible that there's something off with the norm, but when I say a norm, I'm talking about the meta philosophy of it, right?
Sure, if you are.
So, like, what's the meta philosophy here when we're talking about the morality of Soviet Russia versus Nazi Germany? Like, what's the standard we're using to say one is immoral and one is not?
The standard that we're using, or the standard that I'm using, is that it led to bad results in reality. Like I'm anchored to reality in this context. I would say that with regards to the proposition, because you raised force, I believe that the force part is a key factor. So, for example, if we just wanted equality but we didn't use force, then it could be fine. Or if we wanted supremacy but we didn't use force, I mean, it's not. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I don't think like you'll get mass murders in either case. So the force plus something, to me, or at the very least, to me, it seems obvious that the force is a core element.
Yeah, I can agree. I can agree. Force is important here.
Okay, so I'm just saying that. So I just want to like flesh out, or someone can maybe like a sort of investigatory debate where someone can explain to me why these things are connected. Because if for example we say reality is A, concept is B, ethic is C, and then we take, okay, we think we understand reality, let's apply our ethics. We apply our ethics from C, B to A, something terrible happens. So it may be the case that, the C, or the IKEA instructions to how we should build the thing, the instructions themselves are bad because it led to all these bad things happening. Or is it the case that the person putting together the wardrobe was the bad part, and the instructions were fine?
Okay,
kind of what
so
I'm trying
give me that causal story that you said, like, here's how I'm going to pick it out. Give me that story for Soviet Russia and that story for Nazi Germany, and then tell me why both of those stories are equally immoral.
What? In what sense? Right, I don't understand the question.
Well, you said, like, here's reality, here's the idea that was tried in reality, here's the consequence of that idea. It was bad. Okay,
roughly speaking, it's equality and supremacy. So,
but you also said you want to frame this around what actually happened historically. So I'm asking about the actual historical.
Sure, okay, I understand.
Yeah.
So, for example, I'm talking about mass, specifically mass violence, torture, forced starvation, and purges. In the case of socialism and communism, so I'll group those together for argument's sake. We're talking about Stalin's USSR, what happened in the Ukraine, for example. Mao's China and the Great
the Holodomor is what you're talking about. You're comparing the Holodomor versus the Holocaust. Is that what you're doing?
Well, Holodomor was just one of the many things. I mean, if you like Google, for example, worst dictators in the world, like Holodomor is just like a fraction of what Stalin did to his own people.
Right, but okay, so here's where I think the difference between the socialists and you are. You're going to say what Stalin did is socialism, but the socialist is not going to say Stalinism is reflective of socialism. So what happens is a conflation between Stalinism and socialism. So what needs to be demonstrated is that Stalinism is
conflation.
Socialism. Yeah.
Okay, sure. So we're talking about Marxism.
Marxist-Leninism, but that's not the whole of Marxist-Leninism. Stalin is not the whole of that. Like, we can look at what Lenin did, and that's different than what Stalin did. And the way that Stalin ran the country is like way worse.
But isn't the core philosophy behind everything is we need to make everyone equal, economically at least?
No.
No?
No. It's not about equal outcomes.
So isn't the philosophy behind it all is that we have inequality, inequality is bad, and we need to make people equal through this mechanism of workers owning the means of production?
No.
Or am I just missing the point entirely?
No, I think that's sort of framing socialism in like a liberal way, right? Like, a liberal would look at what happened in socialist Russia and say, like, oh, well, they're trying to go for equality here, and the way they're achieving equality is equality of outcome or something like that. But from the socialist perspective, it's that the mechanisms in capitalism are going to entail it's going to entail the destruction of the working class, and these class tensions that pop up are a necessary part of socialism. It's not about equality of outcome. What it is about is it's about stopping this class struggle.
Okay, so this is the chosen people argument.
What do you mean, chosen people argument?
So Karl Popper made the analysis of historicism. I'm being flooded by someone. For
those in the debate, I can't read the chat because invariably I'm going to make an error and someone's going to sort of nitpick it, and that's going to throw me off. I will read it after the chat. So if you're tagging me, I'm not going to respond.
Yeah. So sorry, someone just spammed me and I lost my train of thought. What was the question?
That's exactly why I do not read chat. Okay, so what I'm saying here is that the socialist is not the goal of socialism is not to have equality of outcome. Okay, what it's trying to get at is trying to deflate this class opposition that occurs in capitalism.
Got it. So basically, it's the concept of chosen people that Karl Popper marked in his book. The idea of historicism, which is what, or historical materialism, which is what Marx is using, is that we have this class in history, and it keeps being oppressed, and at some point in the future, because of all these motions of history or patterns in history, it will be.
But this is not an oppression thing.
Sorry?
It's not the framing it as like oppressor versus oppressee is not accurate. Like Marx is not trying to end all oppression. I mean, just look at.
No, wait, one second. Let me explain Karl Popper's position first before we. Let me explain Karl Popper's position badly first, then you can critique it, because I'm only like halfway through the book. But he states very clearly that the concept of historicism, where you go into history, first of all, his critique on historicism is it's unfalsifiable. Like you can always find patterns in history because look at this group of people here, and then in another period of time here, and another period of time here, and it's unfair, and it's bad. And then in the future, it will just occur like these chosen people will elevate to something, and they'll control everything, and they'll be rewarded for all the time. And that this kind of idea of chosen people, it's a very destructive kind of thought, because it makes people believe that either through violence or something, they're going to reach this position of being awarded the rightful place in history. So basically, Karl Popper is saying this sort of historicism, both it's unfalsifiable, which was his claim, to fame and whatnot, and it kind of like incites violence in a sense. But the idea is the chosen people, these group, they're oppressed. Look at history. Oh, they're oppressed here, they're oppressed there. It's unfair to them, and through the history of through the motion of history, at some point they'll be chosen and elevated and rewarded, and everything will be okay.
I don't understand the relevance of Popper here, because I mean, I'm not saying that you're getting Popper wrong, right? Like, I haven't even read his idea of historicism, but what you just described, if it's accurate, is not what Marxism is doing. It's not trying to look at oppressor versus oppressee and liberate the oppressee.
So I would say that Karl Popper specifically targeted all the people that used historicism. If I'm correct, he used critiqued his historicism, and that's the way he categorized it. And I think if I read,
what do you mean by what is Popper's critique of Marx's historicism here? Like Marx's historical materialism is just looking at the conditions.
No, I
understand.
Saying
that the conditions are what's causing. It just seems to me like a causal story from Marx, where it's like, okay, well, feudalism had these conditions, and then feudalism evolved to this condition. Capitalism is also going to evolve.
I'm familiar with I've studied. I'm familiar with the critique. Basically, what Popper's saying is there's always these people, even though you're compared to the economic circumstances, there are always these people that are, worse off. They're oppressed in a sense, or they're in an unfair situation. And I would agree with Karl Popper that it's unfalsifiable. If you find patterns in history, you can just apply it. You want.
So for Popper, it's like when you say unfair situation, right? Like that is an ethical statement.
Sure.
Like Popper is not like, it's, as far as I understand Popper, and I don't know him that well, seems to me like he's more interested in sort of the fill of science kind of thing. And when we're talking about the ethics being unfalsifiable, it seems to me like he's saying we can't answer that question in a descriptive way. We can't use the historical facts to answer fairness or unfairness, right? And it doesn't matter.
That's not what he's trying to.
Well, right, but the point here is like it doesn't matter if it's falsifiable or not from a historical position.
Why?
When we're talking about what's fair or unfair, we're talking about the moral question, right?
Right, but let me just frame it.
It's an empirical thing. It doesn't seem relevant to talk about the empirics of it.
Let me frame it in another way. Yeah, let's say that someone is saying Do you know, if you look at history, it's called historical gingerheadedness. If you look at history, redheaded people have been oppressed. If you look at history here, they've been oppressed, and then they had a golden age, like in Greek mythology. In Greek times, ancient Greek times, there were a lot of emperors that were redheaded, and then they were oppressed through all these time. The redheaded people were oppressed here. They were oppressed here. It's unfair. These groups of people are oppressing them. They haven't done and they haven't done anything wrong. But in the future, when the sun becomes red, these redheaded people will rise up and control the world. So we're building like a sort of, I'm obviously being hyperbolic, but we're building like a sort of narrative where this group is oppressed. They need to fight their oppressors. Here is the evidence in history. Look, all throughout history, they've been oppressed. It's not fair to them. They need to fight it. And then they don't even have to work too hard. At some point in the future, definitely, because of how history operates, they will be the chosen people. So that's basically what he's saying.
That Marx is saying the redheads are the working class.
No, I know that you're a redhead, so I'm giving you an example.
Yeah, I know. But my question is the analogy that the redheads are the working class in Marxism?
Well, Marxism, it's the framing. Marxism is saying, well, look, all throughout history, these people have been oppressed through here, and here. Like, it's not that he lived through those times. He doesn't know how much oppressed they are. He's building like a sort of case, and then he's saying, through the course of history, they will be the chosen people. They will rise up, and they will be, the dictatorship of the proletariat. It's descriptive. They don't have to do too much. It will just happen naturally because of how history works. And he's kind of building a case for the chosen people. Now, look, I think I've explained Karl Popper's position, but yeah, it's the oppressed, it's the oppressor narrative throughout history, and like framing it in that way.
For Marx, it's not. It's about the class struggle, not about oppressor versus oppressee. The lumpen proletariat are not the class that's going to change society.
Yeah, I mean,
the word lumpen is a derogatory word.
The lumpen proletariat, the poor, are not the people Marx wants
to... It's not just poor. It's like vagabonds. It's like...
I understand. Marx says that that group has a stronger affiliation, or they have a need or dependency on the bourgeoisie class. I understood that. That's why I always said Marx never really... what the fuck is going on? Leave me alone.
The point here is that Marx is not framing this.
No, then I disagree.
as like oppressor versus oppressee as a moral struggle.
He has a conflict theory. It's literally called conflict theory.
There's a conflict theory, right? But it's not about oppressor versus oppressee because the oppressees are the lumpen proletariat. He doesn't give a shit about them.
The oppressees are the proletariat.
Lumpen proletariat are a subset of the proletariat, right?
Sorry?
So the oppressed, those who are oppressed include the lumpen proletariat, but they are not. They are not the ones that are going to.
No, I disagree completely with, and I see what you're trying to do. I do not agree whatsoever. No,
with
the people working in industries, the working class, that's who Marx is saying is being oppressed. Poor people are always there. He doesn't think that poor people, I mean, like, homeless people or poor people were always there. He doesn't want to target these people. He thinks that these lumpen proletariat are more dependent on bourgeoisie. Therefore, they won't ever stand with the hardworking working class. It was never. I don't.
No.
I don't think this statement. No, I don't think this statement is valid whatsoever. Sorry.
Okay,
and I read about the lumpen proletariat. That's why I keep saying that Marx doesn't care about poor people.
Zombie, that's not motivating just to say you disagree. Okay, the point I'm making here is that the proletariat are those that bring the most value to production and society. Those are the ones that have the actual power in society.
Of course.
Those outside
I'm
of
sure.
Right, so then the point is that they just need to realize that they have that power.
They are the chosen people. They need to realize their power, claim it, and control everything.
That's not the implication here.
You just kind of said it yourself.
No. I said they're the ones. They already have the power.
I know, right? They already have They just need to realize it and grasp it and take. And they're almost there. They're like so close.
Right. Okay. But this goes back to the question I asked earlier, which you have not addressed.
Okay.
Which is, what is the point of that with the proposition?
So
how does having let me finish. How does having a group of people who bring the most value to a society, who have the actual power, but are controlled by some other group that has taken the power and exploits that power, how is that group of people something that entails something equally as immoral as supremacy of race?
So right. So what I'm saying, this whole framing of the situation is what leads people to get angry, to get frustrated, to want to revolt, to want to get physical. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with that these people have all the power. These people have. I've read Marx. I don't agree that it's the case, and I don't think that it's even a competition between these two classes. I think they're cooperating.
Marx would agree that there's cooperation. He talks about mutual beneficence.
But
mutual benefit is not enough to get rid of exploitation for Marx. He acknowledges that there's agreement and consensus.
I'm sure Marx doesn't like to see, even though they cooperate voluntarily, I'm sure he obviously does, finds exploitation where people don't think it exists.
Yeah, because exploitation is descriptive for Marx, and it's talking about an extraction of value.
And let me just point out, explain what I'm trying to say. There's a framing here where these people are these group of people are exploiting your group of people. You need to get angry. You need to revolt.
No, stop.
What
need to get angry is not entailed by that.
What do you mean? I'm just generalizing, but I don't think it's wrong.
You're saying that a group of people who have this ideology, that they're the ones providing value and they're the ones that are being extracted. You need to get angry. Why is that the case? That they need to get angry? They could have other means of motivating that change. There's been a huge discussion in Marxism of revolution, which is the angry version, and reform. The reformists are those who are restraining their anger and not doing this revolt. Like it's a comment. It's been in Marxism for a long time.
I don't think this point is like something we need to really dwell upon. So if I change angry to frustrated, then at the very least, like we see like a framing. And you could, in the same context, you can replace proletariat with German people and oppressors with Jewish people. No, it's not. We haven't. The sentences we're using can be interchangeable at this point. That they can. The German people are the chosen people. They're being oppressed and what are they doing? They're being sabotaged from within by these minorities. And these minorities these Jews control all these things. The poor Aryan nations, so on and so forth. And we need to get angry, we need to get frustrated, we need to do something about it. Am I saying something completely extreme at this point?
I think you're making a false comparison here. So
really, okay.
let me. So what I'm saying is you are trying to shoulder socialism into being just this angry one.
I haven't even started.
Let me finish. And then you're saying like, okay, well, not angry, but let's just say frustrated. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't talk about the type of immorality in question for the proposition.
Right.
Because a reformist, let me finish. A reformist Marxist is not going to try and kill all the capitalists, is not going to starve people they disagree with or anything like that. Let me finish. Is not going to do any of that kind of stuff. What they're going to do is have these slow reforms that's going to try and gradually move society to where they want it to be. Wonderful. That is a type of that is force that we could talk about through the state that would be used for equality, so to speak. That's very different than force used for supremacy.
Alco, we're on literally point one. We haven't even gone over any point. So I appreciate the anchoring it back to the original proposition, but we're not anywhere near. Like we don't have a complete picture to then say, well, we don't have a complete picture yet. So we're just on point one, which was Karl Popper's chosen people based on historicism. That we haven't moved any further than that.
The relevance of chosen people is not.
I'm saying you can't. I don't think it's a good time. I'm just saying I don't think it's a good time to say, well, we haven't proved anything yet. We haven't started. It was just one point.
No, that's not my claim.
No,
My claim is
you're
that
saying
my claim
Yeah.
here is that you're trying to shoulder socialism into just the violent kind of socialism. Force for
No,
equality is just this
I
violent type. That's what you're trying to say. You're narrowly defining it. I'm saying that there's a category of socialism that is not this violent socialism
okay.
that
I
would use force
understand.
for equality, and that type of
I
socialism is
understand.
not as immoral as force for supremacy.
I understand. So let's just say we haven't gotten to the violence part. I accept that, or at least it's written here and there, but we haven't got to the violence part yet. I'm just framing that there is a conflict between two groups that was framed in the context of historicism, and Karl Popper, who critiques Marx using this method for various reasons, calls it the chosen people, I don't know, method or something like that. And that's all we are. And the idea here is that you just like get a bunch of people, get a group of people, an identity group or something, upset at something. You explain to them why they're being exploited. You have this narrative through history, and you say, look at here, it's evidence, literally evidence. Here it was good, here it was bad, here it is bad. You're being exploited, and soon it will be good in the future. That's all I'm saying. Now, how that's implemented, we haven't got into that yet, but I'm just framing it for the first point in this way.
Right. You're not. So what I've explained twice, and this might be me poorly explaining it. You're saying that this group of people are told that they're the chosen people when this idea of being the chosen people is in the group and they're motivated to have change, that they will be violent.
No, I haven't said that yet. I haven't said that yet.
That's the
I
claim
haven't
you're
said
getting.
that yet.
You said, let me finish, dude. You said earlier that you said at the very beginning, before we went down this Popper rabbit hole, that socialism results in these consequences. And then when I asked you for an example, you started with this ideology. And so now you're saying, like, I haven't said that, but that's your goal of where you're getting to.
But I have to build but that's fair, but I have to build the case with other points. The first point, if you like say, well, the first point doesn't count yet, I say, well, let me finish the other points because otherwise it won't be a complete picture, which you can then say doesn't lead to violence.
I'm not saying this is the end of the debate, but I'm just asking for agreement here that there are two types of motivation that can result from that one point, that one starting point. One can be reform, and then one can be violent. Okay.
So
do you agree?
If you remove force, so I think it's premature to raise this point now, personally. But if you're saying if we don't use force, then there won't be force, then I could apply it to any system.
No, there's force used in both. The word force is brought. The word force is. Let me finish, please. There's force used in both. The word force is used broadly. We can use force to mean something like physical violence, or we can use force as in something like the state is enforcing it under threat of violence.
Okay.
So, for example, you're forced to pay your taxes or you'll be locked in a prison cell, right?
Yep.
Okay. The reformist is going to be using the threat of force via state mechanisms versus the revolutionary who is going to literally take something from someone.
So you're saying both have force, but one is lighter.
They're different kinds of force. They're different categories of force, right?
So let's say
force is broad.
Yeah.
Is one point. And then the other point is that there are different actions after the motivation for change.
Okay. So let me just play devil's advocate to your position for a second. Let's say in the case of fascism, they use the state mechanism to pass laws that make the minority groups like sort of like second-class citizens. Yeah, so they have less rights here and there. No, some force, no real violence or something like that. They just make these minorities second-class citizens, and that's it. That's all they do.
What is entailed by second-class citizens?
I don't know. Not less access to certain jobs, less access to like economic consequences to some degree, but no one's, unless they start a fight with the police officer, no one, like, it's not outright removal. It's just we don't like them very much, and they can stay there, but that's it.
Okay, so let's take this tier for an example, where we're comparing like force via taxation and redistribution of wealth versus a law making someone a second-class citizen, like an apartheid state. So let's take that same tier, okay? And let's ask the question, are they equally immoral? Is it equally immoral to tax the rich and redistribute that wealth?
I don't know if we're there yet. No, I don't know.
Versus having these second-class citizens who aren't allowed to work certain jobs based on their race, aren't allowed in certain spaces based on their race, aren't allowed in certain schools based on their race. Would you say that those are equally immoral?
I would say that I think this line of questioning once again is premature until we've covered more points. If you want to say,
we can go to the other points, but I want an answer on this tier where we're just cashing out at this tier. This isn't the whole of the debate, but this tier, where it's at the beginning, like we're just comparing types of force where laws are made and the threat of violence is what is motivating the action, where we look at both of those things. You brought up the comparison here of the second-class citizen as a counterexample of mine. So it is fair to make this comparison because you are positing it as from the other side as a devil advocate position. This comparison, is it equally immoral? Yes or no?
Is it equally immoral? I can frame it like this. In both
it's just a yes or no question.
Let me frame it. In both
a yes or no question.
Let me answer it my way, please. In both cases, you have the government applying force on a minority group. In one case, in the first example, they are, let's say, using theft. They're stealing property, okay? And in the other case, what we said apartheid, so forcing some kind of economic consequences, we said?
Yeah, like no, they can't work certain jobs. They can't go to certain schools.
So reduction in economic freedoms.
Yeah, we could cash it out that way, sure.
I mean, equal or not, both are not looking super moral.
Right, but the question, the proposition is that they are equally immoral. I think we can easily say one is worse.
but the context of equally immoral is that people died as a result of it. That was the point.
But we're talking here at this tier.
No, but we're removing force from the equation and saying, are they equally immoral?
It's just a different kind of force.
A lighter kind of force, but that's not the idea.
It's force.
In general, I mean, to some degree, the immorality is in both cases. How much?
Are they
I don't know.
equally immoral or not?
In what sense am I measuring this?
That's what I asked you at the beginning of the debate, and you didn't answer me. What's the standard? And then you went to this like, oh, well, it's about reality and our ethics, and it doesn't match up. We see these patterns, and it doesn't cash out in reality. And I don't understand what that means.
We're being pedantic about the word equal.
It's not.
So if it's slightly unequal, then the whole proposition is down. I mean, because if you want,
it's just a yes or no question. You put the proposition that things can be equally moral or not. For you to then sit here,
but I think you're using.
Let me finish. For you to then say like, oh, well, we can't even ask the question about morality being equal or not, seems to me like it's out of the spirit of the proposition. Like you put it forward, you must have some answer for something being morally equal or not. That seems absurd to me not to.
So the equality, that they're equally moral is that they both led to millions of people dying, in my opinion. That was the idea.
So here we have a causal story where force is leading to some consequence based on the ideology. The ideology is leading to a consequence. The force is creating that consequence. I'm asking you yes or no if they're equally immoral. And the reason why this framing is relevant is your position for why the socialist beliefs cause the deaths is because the ideology motivates the consequences.
Sure,
Here's
I'll
an
say,
example. Here's a weak example.
Sure, for argument's sake, I'll say they're equally immoral, so we can continue.
All right, so this is a place of disagreement, and we can't continue because for me, it's obviously more immoral that someone would be economically disadvantaged based on the color of their skin versus redistributing the wealth through taxation. That to me seems right there. That disagreement right there.
Can you
we
say
can't move past it.
Can you just change it to using force to steal someone's property?
Yeah, sure, but I don't consider that theft of property. I don't think taxation is theft.
You said redistribution of property. So you're
of
taking
wealth,
a lot of the property.
Redistribution of wealth.
Why don't you think stealing is immoral?
It's not stealing.
It is literally stealing. You're taking it by force.
Taxation is not stealing.
Okay, so if they
What's
say
the
no,
argument
what happens?
for taxation being stealing? Why is taxation stealing?
Oh my god.
You made the claim.
This is really disappointing. This is completely not the thing I want to discuss right now. This is really
it doesn't matter. You brought it up in the debate. If you don't want to discuss don't make the claim.
We stopped at the first point where we're talking about is it equal, semantically equal, and now we're talking about taxation is not theft, or stealing property is not immoral. What do you want me to say?
As a meta point
it's a justified reason of stealing it, therefore it's fine.
As a meta point here, if you bring up a claim, it is reasonable for me to ask you to support that claim. You brought up the claim that it is theft, and you asked me, why do I support theft? Why do I think theft is okay? Why do I think theft is moral?
We're going down a completely different direction here.
Okay, don't bring it up.
The point was the mass deaths, not like is theft immoral. It's like a complete sidetrack to the main issue.
Mass
death is immoral. Mass death is immoral.
I'm asking you.
I answered you.
I'm asking you, one, to answer if it's equally immoral or not. You said it is equally immoral. I disagree.
Good for you. Can we continue?
No, because we can't move downstream from a disagreement.
Okay, so apart from taxation, right? So all the other mechanisms of equality and seizing the means of production and killing people who had, in the case of Cambodia, who looked like they're intelligent and they were unequal to people in rural areas, so they were shot. They had glasses and looked intelligent, so they would be equal. All these kinds of mechanisms were just completely gonna put to the side and say, oh, well, taxation is therefore finished. Finish the debate. Okay, great.
No, the debate is not finished because of that. We have to make progress on a fundamental premise before we move downstream. That's all I'm saying.
Okay,
I'm not saying that this is the end of the debate. We have to make progress here.
So you're saying taxation or taking forcefully property from someone and doing X with it is moral in a certain context.
If a state is justified, then the state has the right to tax its people.
So justified stealing. So if the stealing is justified, then it's moral. But
if it's justified, it's not stealing.
So it's
not theft. So let me explain something here for a second.
It's not theft if it's justified. I can put up some hypotheticals.
It has to do with the social contract of the state. If we talk about a hypothetical social contract, like a Rawlsian hypothetical social contract, a rational person in a veil of ignorance will choose the state versus a not state. That's sort of the slapdash version, right? Okay. There's consent to being part of the state and the state existing. Okay. By consenting to the state, you consent to the state's powers, which include taking property to redistribute it amongst the people. When you consent to
I don't agree with this. I don't agree with this.
Let me finish. When you consent, let me finish. When you consent to your property being taken, that is not theft. You are consenting. Theft is not consenting to it being taken.
So if the minorities in the example of fascism are in the country, then they by default consented to be in that country. And if that country passes laws which makes them economically disadvantaged, then they consented to this happening.
No.
No?
No.
Why not?
Because in a veil of ignorance, a rational person would not consent to being a second-class citizen and being oppressed by the state.
I think this is highly selective and frankly bullshit. I don't know what to say. Like here, it's exactly the same thing. They're in the state. They
No, it's
chose
not
to be.
exactly the same thing.
You're
You're
saying they
changing the
chose to be.
standard.
You're saying they
You're
chose
changing
to
the
be
standard.
there. You're the one attaching the veil of ignorance as a standard. I'm not.
Yeah, I'm saying that's a reasonable standard to use when we're talking about a social contract.
I completely don't agree.
Okay, how do you justify state's power?
How is this relevant to this right now? I don't know what to say.
Because you made the claim that taxation is theft.
Can we
and
continue?
No, this is where we disagree.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Forget the veil of ignorance.
Let me finish. No, you have to answer mine. I asked you, how do you justify the power of the state?
The role, if the state commits to its role of protecting individual rights and property rights, then the state has justified authority over the people. If it protects their individual rights and property rights, then it has justified authority. But I'm not prepared to answer this question in this context.
So does the state have a right to tax in order to do that, to provide security?
No. That would violate the property taxes, the property rights.
So you think that on your view, a state is unjustified if taxation exists?
Say again?
On your view, if taxation is something the state does, it's unjustified.
Taxation would violate property rights even in the constitutional context.
So that means it's unjustified. The power of the state would be unjustified.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I disagree there. Sure. I think if you consent,
can I ask the question though? If I finish answering yours?
Yeah.
If I have some money and my neighbor needs my money for an urgent reason, and he comes and points a gun at me, says, "Give me your money, I need it desperately." Mm-hmm. Is that theft?
If the gun to my head and he's telling me to take it, and I don't want to give it to him?
You don't. Well, he just told him. He came to you with a gun, says, "Give me your money, I need it."
Yeah.
Is it theft?
I would call that theft, sure.
Okay, if he went round and gathered all the people in the street,
mm-hmm.
and say, "I need his money." He's the person with the most money on the street,
mm-hmm.
and I need his money, and they persuade everyone else, and they both come as a group and said, with like sticks and torch and pitchforks, "Give us your money." Is that theft?
Where everyone's demanding the money, otherwise they'll
everyone on the street comes, like he persuades everyone on the street, they all come together and said, "Give us your money."
And does he have an expectation that they're going to do that to him?
I'm sorry?
Is it reasonable for him to expect the community to take it from him?
No. I don't.
Then yeah, it's theft.
Okay. So let's
do
say.
You see why I asked the question?
Let's take the third. Let's say the third iteration of this. Everyone in the street says, "We need to have a vote about this." So it's like I don't know, like 20 people. They go to the city hall or town hall. They say, "This guy needs money. We want to take it from this guy."
Does he agree to the vote being held?
No.
Okay. Does he agree to be part of the community?
He lives where he is, so I don't know what that meant.
Does he agree to be part of the community? Does he agree with the results of the vote? Does he agree with the right of the community to vote? Does he agree that
he does not agree? I'll answer your question. He does not agree with the vote being held in that context, no.
Right, okay. So then he's someone who doesn't want to be part of the community.
I mean, you could layer it that way in like a strange way, but
it's not strange. This is a very standard way to layer political theory.
So you're saying because he's part of a collective, then he owes them something, and therefore it's not theft.
If he agrees to participate in a collective,
doesn't agree to the vote.
Let me finish.
But you don't know my example too. You don't know my example yet. You don't know my example.
Let me finish.
Finish what?
If he agrees to be part of if he agrees to be part of a community, then he has duties to the community.
Okay, so the vote is this. 20 people, including you or the person we're discussing, and the neighbor who needed the money, they go have the vote and say, we are voting on this person's property. Yeah, but we're taking a vote on his money to give it to this man. And he says, no, I don't agree to this at all. As well, tough luck. They do a vote. They vote, almost everyone except from that person saying, you have to give your money to that person. Is that theft?
Does he doesn't agree, and he's not part of the community and doesn't have duties to the community.
Oh my God.
It's relevant.
What duties to the community? The neighbor, literally like a minute ago, this neighbor needed the money and he pointed the gun at him. You said it was theft, but now we're having
right, because the person, hold on. So what happens in this anarchist chain is they try to take a situation where there is no consent, and then they try to extrapolate it all the way down to a bigger and bigger system, and then say, hey, there's still no consent. But along the way, there's a moment where consent would be added in a situation like the state or someone living in a country.
But you're the one adding it.
No, I'm not. It's added by the citizenry having the social contract. The social contract has the consent baked into it. That's the nature of the contract. You consent to the state having this authority.
Did someone sign any contract?
I'm not talking about the strong form of a Lockean contract like that. I'm talking about a Rawlsian hypothetical contract.
So in a hypothetical contract that doesn't really exist, if someone is born into a country, did they sign the social contract? They're just literally born right now. Did they sign a contract?
They're not persons in the state yet. They can't.
They were born, then they're 18. Did they sign a contract?
If they consent to being in the state, yeah.
And how is that? How do you measure that?
By participating in the state.
So as long as they just physically stay in, the consent is
It's
implied.
not just physically staying in. It's not just physically staying in.
Yeah.
There's a family resemblance here of the things that would make up consent being under a state. Part of it is participation. The other part of it is not moving. The other part of it is not changing the state.
Essentially, if they stay in the state after the age of 18, for argument's sake, and they do stuff in the state, the consent is implied.
When they take responsibility over their duties to the state, then yes. They're consenting to participating in the state.
Because I can start making like an argument over if a girl goes with a guy on a date, then at some point there's implied consent under the same context.
No.
No, if he buys her a drink, if he agrees to,
let me explain. If a girl goes on a date and she says, and she participates in the date, she enjoys it. She communicates how much she's enjoying the date, how much she wants to make out with the dude, how much she wants to have sex. In participating in the date, she says, yes, I want to have sex with you, and then has sex with him. That's consensual.
What if she did the whole date thing, but she didn't really want to have the sex part?
And she said no, and then the guy left her alone.
So she has to say no, yeah?
No, she doesn't have to say no. But also, what you're forgetting here is the man on the date or the woman on the date has a duty not to take it without consent.
But
there's a disanalogy here between the state and taxation.
But you said consent is implied if she does these things.
Sorry, what?
You said consent is implied if she does these things.
If she says yes, then
no, she didn't say yes. The word implied means she didn't, right?
Okay, she didn't say yes.
She said yes to the initial date, let's say, and everything, but the sex is at the end, right? And she hasn't said yes to it, but it's implied
because everything else.
She participated in the other things. Therefore, technically, it's implied that she consented.
Yeah, and she's happily having sex with you. I think there's nonverbal consent. I think that's possible.
So if she's not happy to do it, but she participated in the date, she ate the food, I don't know. I don't want to add too much details, but like she did certain things, but she's not happy to do the sex part. And she's either non-verbally saying it or even outright saying no. Is that consent?
You're telling me that she's non-verbally
She
not
participated
consenting.
she participated in everything. She did the responsibility when she agreed to go, and she did the responsibility to come with you. With the person, sorry. She did all the social responsibility or whatnot, but then at the end she said no.
Yeah, she said no, she's not consenting.
Well, I said don't tax. I'm saying don't tax me.
Right. Okay. So here's a meaningful difference, right?
Okay.
When we talk about the taxation of the state, it's not duties between two partners, right? There's an asymmetry of duties when it comes to a state versus a person. The person doesn't have the same obligation or the same claims it can make on a state, but two people on a date who are co-equals can make the same types of claims to each other. And there are different responsibilities between someone on a date versus a state to its citizenry.
But the consent is very, very different in both cases. Yes, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that there's an asymmetry when it comes to the consent. I mean, for example, in a date, like you don't just like you're not born into a date.
Yeah, I know. Like, obviously, born means you consented. You were born to this country, and therefore you consented. You said yes to the date. You consented to the date, but at some point you didn't want to go.
Being born is not what confers consent to the state. Okay. Not just being born in it.
Let's fast forward a little bit because I don't think it's helpful. Let's talk about collectivism. Would you like to read? Would you like me to read the definition?
No, what I want to talk about is force for equality versus force for supremacy. And I want to really get at the disagreement we have.
Can I continue building that? Can I continue building that case? Because I haven't done so.
I think you did do so whenever. Let me explain how you did. You said that when there's a causal chain, this causal chain leads to these mass deaths. Here's an example of it happening in Russia. And it has to do with this chosen people idea.
That's
and
one
that chosen
of the
people
reasons.
idea. Yeah, okay. So to say that you haven't built the case is erroneous. You've started to build the case.
I haven't finished.
And I've pointed out it doesn't have to be finished.
Oh my God! What sort of debate is this? I've done one of 7 things I wanted to talk about, and you said it was already finished.
We have disagreement on one. I didn't say it's finished. We have disagreement on one.
Okay.
We have to make progress on the disagreement.
No, we agreed to disagree on it. You asked me something, we agreed to disagree.
It's fundamental to the proposition.
Okay, you asked me if they're both equal. I said yes, and we're continuing.
I say they're not equal.
No, that's fine.
So here's how I framed it.
But it's not relevant to the point.
It's relevant to the entire proposition. From the very beginning.
You're blocking me from just finishing what I wanted to talk about, so I don't know what to say.
Because I think this is the way that a debate should go. We need to make progress on the disagreement before we go downstream from the disagreement.
I just don't see how the deaths of millions of people is hinging on the points you're making at the moment.
Because we're not just doing a body count to decide how it's equally immoral or not. We're talking about a causal story here.
But I haven't finished explaining all the causes that lead to it.
Okay, I understand that, right? Like, it's clear to me that you have these 6 other points you want to make.
Yep.
Right. So I'm saying here on this one point that you think they're equally immoral. I think that they're not equally immoral. And one is clearly more immoral than the other.
So you're going over the semantic technicality of the first proposition, yes? You're saying because you think one side is less immoral than the other, therefore the whole thing should fall apart? Is that what you're saying? Because I can just leave the debate if that's what you want to do. I don't know. We're discussing something entirely different. It could be the case that I worded it imperfectly at the time, and I should have given 5 sentences instead of just 1 sentence. That could be on me, and I think even some people recommend it. But I tried to explain my position further in the opening statement. If you want to get semantic, this sentence is written in stone, and we have to analyze every minutia of it. And if it's slightly wrong, therefore the debate doesn't hold, then it's just like a semantic technicality that it doesn't go to the heart of the matter whatsoever.
So,
I
okay,
mean, it's up
I
to you.
don't,
If you want to,
rhetorical,
let me just finish my sentence. If you want to do it this way, say, yeah, I'm just happy to attacking the sentence, but not the actual spirit of it. That's fine. You can do that.
framing this as just a semantical thing trivializes the point I'm making. Semantics is the study of meaning. When we look at a proposition, we're looking at the meaning of that proposition. Meaning is not a meaning. Let me finish. Meaning is not a trivial thing here. When we're talking about force used for equality versus force used for supremacy, and then being equally immoral, when I am asking you questions about what that means, and when I am describing differences I have with you, for you to then say that's a semantic game, trivializes what I'm talking about, which is the heart of the proposition, the heart of the debate, where specifically we disagree.
That's not the heart of the debate. The heart of the debate is that these two systems killed millions of people, and I'm saying that they're both morally wrong. That's the heart of the debate. And then the only way that we can go around and say, well, this system could have gone this way, but then it could have gone another way. Therefore, it's not the core system itself may not be more, but this other system had to go this way. Therefore, it is definitely more. That's the heart of the system.
So when I said something is entailed versus something is not entailed, what is that? That's picking out is an asymmetry in the causal story. It's like unpacking confounding factors in correlation when we look at a study, right?
Okay.
So what I'm saying is, in one case, there's a stronger causal narrative, and then in another case, that causal narrative is very weak. In a case where we have a stronger causal narrative for the deaths versus a weak causal narrative for the deaths, the one with the stronger causal narrative is more immoral than the one with a weak causal narrative. That's my position.
Okay, but you haven't let me describe the causes. Just one.
So you have 7. List all
I
7
don't know
causes
exactly.
and list them
I have
very
many more
briefly.
points. I have many more points. I'm not sure if they match up the 7, but according to my bullet list, they're not. There's quite a few more, and we haven't talked about. Now. Even on your point, yes. If you're saying the reason for equality, is moral, just which is kind of like the point, basically, at the heart of the thing. To make society equal is moral. That's why the theory is good, even though it led to these millions of people dying. It can't be the case that this theory is immoral, because on its face, being equal or making this equality is good. So how is it?
That's not the claim.
Listen. How could it possibly be the case that if we're trying to make people equally economically, let's say, that all these bad things happen and people die? No, I can't.
That's not the claim.
I'm just gonna rule it from my mind.
That's not the claim.
What do you mean it's not the claim?
The claim from the socialists. You said that the equality will cause the deaths, but it's okay because equality itself is good. The socialist isn't saying that. The socialist is denying that the pursuit of equality is causing the deaths in the first place.
It's not trying to make people economically. It's not trying to make people economically equal.
What did I just talk about? Can you repeat what I just said?
You're saying they're not trying to do any. They're not trying to put people equality. I'm asking you.
That's not what I said. Can you repeat what I said?
You're saying equality is not what socialists are trying to do.
I did not mention. No. You said that force for equality causes the deaths. I am saying the socialist is denying it's causing the deaths. Do you understand that?
The socialist is saying that the equality part or the force part or both.
You are making the claim.
Yep.
Socialism is using force to create equality amongst the people.
Yep.
That force for equality causes deaths.
Yep.
The socialist is denying the consequence there. which is causes deaths. That's
Well,
the disagreement between you and the socialist.
So how could they possibly be denying it when it was a political system that was being implemented under many different countries across period of history, and in many occasions it did result in those deaths. Now you could say that or in some kind of different variant of it, where we are very careful to not repeat the mistakes of the past, then maybe. But it did happen. And you can't say that this is no longer socialism, in my opinion, because these bad things happened. Obviously,
what they're saying. Sorry, I thought you were done.
Well, obviously, people were implementing their system to the best of their understanding. It could be the case that something went wrong along the way, but they were implementing that philosophy, that political and economic system, and this thing happened. So unless you're saying something magically stopped and like this is no longer true socialism and everything else is just right-wing bullshit, then it's a very nice thing to say. But the USSR, what no?
What the socialist is going to say is that it wasn't the economic theory that caused the deaths, but it was the state power and these other ideas that caused the mass death.
Okay, let me build the case then that the economic system leads to authoritarianism.
Before we do that, do you at least understand? Can you repeat back to me the claim the socialist is making?
They're saying that the economic system could not lead to this authoritarianism. Something went wrong along the way, roughly speaking. No.
What they're saying is that in this event that happened in history, the causal story for the mass deaths are not the economic theory. The causal story for the mass deaths are related more to protection of the state power.
Okay, then I would
not the economic theory.
I understand. So you want me to repeat something?
Can you repeat that back to me, just in your own words?
That the economic theory did not lead to mass death. It was the authoritarian government that caused the mass death, not the economic theory.
Well, I mean, that's close, but the idea...
What did I miss?
Well, it's just that you described sort of the consequences, but not the idea of it. It's that there's a different causal story. That the important part here is there's a different causal story than the one you're attacking that caused the deaths.
So, Arco, if it's... Do you want me to repeat something else? Because it's getting a bit late.
You can go on now.
Okay, so let's... I would say that we have an element of collectivism, and I'd like to introduce how I see collectivism is, so we can have like a common understanding. You can agree and disagree, it's up to you. But I'll just read out, it's like a few lines. Collectivism is the theory that the group or the collective has primacy over the individual. Collectivism holds in human affairs the collective society, the community, the nation, the proletariat, the race, etc., is the unit of reality and the standard of value. On this view, the individual has reality only as part of the group and value insofar as he serves it. On its own, he has no political rights. He is to be sacrificed for the group whenever, well, you probably disagree with this part, he has to be sacrificed for the group whenever it or its representative, the state, deems this was desirable.
What do you want me to do with that definition?
Do you agree or disagree? And if so, why?
Do I agree or disagree with what?
This definition of collectivism.
I don't understand what I'm supposed to agree or disagree with. I don't think that that's accurate to what happens in reality.
What would you say is accurate?
For what happens in reality?
Two collectives. Or collectivism.
I don't understand. What do you mean a collective?
So let's say collectivism and contrast it with individualism for argument's sake.
Well, I think that's a false dichotomy because I think the individual is
I disagree strongly with that statement.
Okay.
Collectivism, individualism are other side of the spectrum.
Right. A spectrum is not a dichotomy.
A dichotomy. Other side of the coin.
No, they're just two ends. Like to me, a dichotomy is something black and white, and those two options exhaust the case, right? But whenever it just seems to me like this is a weird definition to me. Like, I don't understand a lot of what it's even saying. Like,
should I repeat how I described it so we can go over it because it's important?
No, I would just rather just explain to you my view of what I
Okay.
think is happening with humanity, because
Whoa, hold on. Can you explain to me what you think collectivism is before you go to humanity in general?
I don't know what collectivism isn't a thing I'm used to hearing, right? Like, I only hear it from Randians.
We need to at least have a vague notion what this is so we can continue.
No, we can use all kinds of words and terms here to continue. We don't have to use a proprietary definition
What is
from
statism?
Randian philosophy.
What is statism?
I don't understand the relevance.
A country that is statist, what is it?
I don't understand the relevance of the question. Why are you asking that?
You don't understand the relevance of the question? Because
yeah,
at least you said USL was you said the USL was authoritarian. You said that other plus was authoritarian. So it follows that they were statist countries.
Okay, but you're asking me. Hold on. You're asking me what the definition of statism is after you asked me what if I agree or disagree with a definition about collectivism. When my response to collectivism was to tell you what I think is happening with humanity, where I think this dichotomy between individual or you're completely the subject of some collective unit, to me seems to me incorrect. I don't understand then why we're changing gears all of a sudden to like, what's the definition of statism? That seems totally nonsensical to me. It's a non sequitur. Tell me the relevance for why you're asking that definition.
Let me tell you the relevance.
And tell me why I cannot provide for you what I think is happening with humanity when it comes to being a social creature.
Well, let's just say it this way. So let's say if the state is all power, let's take Hegel's divine state. Perhaps, I'm not sure that's the right analogy, but
can you just explain simply why you ask those questions? I don't want like a 5-minute. I don't want a 5-minute monologue about Hegel and collectivism and Rand and all that. Just simply ask me the question.
Well, I would say that the USSR, China, Cambodia, Italy, and Nazi Germany were all collectivist. I don't think that's a stretch.
I don't know what you mean by collectivist. This is what we were going over.
I described it though.
Right, and the definition made no sense to me.
Okay, is it the case that in any of these countries that the individual was more important than the state or collective, state or group?
I don't know what you mean by the individual being more important or the state being more important.
Was the state a collection of individuals and individuals were the primary, or was it the case that the state or the class was the primary and the individual serves it?
I don't understand what you mean by primary. Primary in what sense?
More important.
In what sense?
Any sense, really, all senses. The state is the group is more important than the individual in it. The individual has to serve the collective.
Morally more important? What are you talking about?
Morally more important.
Is that what you're saying? If in those countries that
look, we're gonna have a problem. Okay, what part of the definition wasn't clear? Sorry.
Well, it talked about the individual being that the way that the collectivism views the individual is that the community or the collective is reality, right? That part makes no sense to me. Like, what the fuck does that even mean?
I'm not sure I said that, but let's take.
Read it again. Read it again. Read the definition again.
Collectivism is the theory that the group has primacy over the individual. Collectivism holds in human affairs that the collective society, the community, the nation, the proletariat, the race, I would add the tribe, etc., is the unit of reality.
That is what I was just talking about. Is the unit of reality? Is the unit of reality? What the fuck does that mean to think that your community is the unit of reality? What does that mean?
You're not important. Your tribe is what's important. The tribe needs to beat the other tribe. The tribe needs to survive. You need to serve the tribe and the people inside of it. You need to protect it with your life. You need to sacrifice yourself towards it.
Right. So okay, but like you not being as like you as an individual being totally unimportant, I think is something that doesn't exist in even the most communitarian groups.
I didn't say totally unimportant, but the tribe is more important than the individual in it. The tribe is more important than you.
I think that there are times where we, in all communities, sometimes the community has primacy and sometimes the individual has primacy. I don't think it's going to be exhausted to say that the individual always has primacy or exhausted to say that the community always has primacy. And I think defining it that way, narrowly defining it that way, is uninformative here. I don't think that's accurate to reality.
I do think it's accurate to reality. I think that
Why?
in these
Why should I believe that?
I think that in these countries at those periods of time they showed collectivist behavior. The state was, even in the case of, let's say, Italy's fascism, the state's more important than the individual. I mean, if you want me to read like Hitler quotes where he says like the individual must put down their ego and serve the state, that's how they really will be free and stuff like that, I can do that. But like the idea
So is your claim that this idea that the collective is more important than the individual is what is shared in common between these viewpoints, and that idea is what ends up leading to all of these deaths?
I wouldn't say it will definitely lead to all these deaths, but it's one of the components, yes.
Okay. So that to me seems like a very different claim than the proposition you put forward.
Well, again, I have to put all the components together.
But that it seems like a totally different, it's a totally different claim. It's not relevant to the proposition. Like what you're doing is you're defining collectivism in such a way that it would be shared by both of these extremes, and then you're saying like, oh, well, guess what? This hidden thing that's shared by both is actually the thing that's immoral, and that means that they're both equally immoral. But what's happened is you've changed the proposition from being about force used for X and force used for Y is equally immoral to this property of Z is in both, and that property is immoral. That's a really different claim.
Hold your horses. I haven't said that something is or isn't immoral yet, but
that's where you're going, right?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, so you're not going to say that the shared property between the two is what makes them immoral. You're not going to say that?
Oh my God, this is really aggressive.
I just answer the question. Are you going to say that or not?
I didn't plan to. I don't know.
So what's the relevance to the proposition?
But I think it's relevant. I just wanted to say that these different states or countries in that particular time showed collectivist behavior, as in I'm observing a pattern that's exhibits in all of them, that they showed collectivist behavior, that the collective, the proletariat, is more important than one worker in it. The state in Italy, the fascist state, is more important than one person in it. It's the state is the sum of everyone together, and that's what needs to exist and survive and thrive. If everyone does that, then the individuals in the collective will also survive and thrive and whatnot. But the collective is more important individually. It's just an observation that I'm making across all these different groups.
Okay, so it's not relevant to the proposition. It's just something that it's just you just wanted to share.
Jesus,
is it relevant or not?
Christ. It is relevant.
Saying fuck off does not tell me why it's relevant. What's the relevance? Tell me
what is the relevance. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you agree that according to this definition, that everyone, both the socialists and the communists and the fascists and the Nazis, exhibited collectivist behavior, or at least statist behavior?
Statist to me just seems like authoritarian, which I've already talked about. They both were.
Sure.
I don't see. I think collectivist is not helpful.
But the philosophy is, why did these people hand over the rights to these authoritarian government? Because they believed that they are part of a collective.
Hand over their rights. What are you talking about?
Well, that's kind of the idea. Like if in Weimar Republic they had
they did not hand over their rights. They were seized.
there was a large majority in Nazi Germany that wanted Hitler to come in. Yes, he didn't get all the votes, but he did have a very large group in the country that were for him. And then a lot of people really admired Hitler, and also like the
They
culture.
didn't give up their rights.
The culture at the time.
They
Hitler-
allowed Hitler to take rights from subgroups of the society.
No, but also they had less individual rights because they wanted to belong to a collective. If they all had individual rights, then Hitler couldn't do like. Well, I mean, this is a different topic.
Yeah,
Let me
exactly.
let me explain it in a different way, right? So let me say that the culture in Nazi Germany, sorry, in before Nazi Germany, the culture in Germany at the time was a collectivist culture. We had all these people saying, you know, it is your duty to serve the state.
That's not
the
collectivist.
collectivist. Sorry?
That's not collectivist.
That is exactly what it is.
No, you don't say because you have a duty to serve the state, that does not then mean that the state is primary to the individual. You can have individuals who have duties to the state, for example, paying your taxes, but that doesn't then mean that doesn't then mean that you are then have a duty to kill yourself for the state. Like that seems to me like a false dichotomy.
Yeah, I think, let me explain it in a different way. All individuals have a duty to the state. The more dutiful they are to the state, the more moral they are.
I don't think that was how that was framed in Nazi Germany.
The culture.
It wasn't framed as to the state. It was framed as to the German people. No, the state was an instrument for the German people, and the German people was the highest ideal.
Okay, the German people, the Aryan nation, is a sort of collective.
Right, but you're conflating this identity as a community with the state. Those are different things. The state was an instrument for that.
The state was so we had the nation, right? And the state was the leaders of that nation telling it where to go. But it was everyone was there together plus the leaders. That was the collective.
Okay, but what's happening here, right? So you say that's the collective, but then you have this very, very strict definition of collectivism where that collective has primacy.
I don't think it's strict. I don't think it's strict. I think it's a category.
Right, and I'm saying the category itself is flawed because it's narrowly defining
No.
All right, so then why should I accept your definition?
What other?
We disagree. Why should I accept it? Why should anyone in the audience accept it?
I think that the fact that you're saying it's strict I think you realize that it's correct. I think you're just saying it's strict so you can like eliminate it because, well, it wasn't exactly collective. It still had a little bit of something. It was largely collective. The category of it was collective. The culture in Nazi Germany was collective. The type of like Aryan nation, like we are together, these people, we are a group, we are a tribe, these people are attacking us. That's a collectivist like point of view. Yes, they had leaders, which was the leaders of the political party, but it was a collective. And the people at the time, they didn't like the Weimar Republic because they were trying all this like liberal individual stuff, like a mixed economy. They didn't like it. They wanted a strong man to lead the collective in the right direction.
So one, you're accusing me of mind reading because you said, I think you think this definition is right, but you're trying to get rid of the definition. That's mind reading. That's not motivating for the proposition. Two, here's my problem with what, let me finish.
I'm finding this exhausting.
Here's my problem with what you're doing right now.
Okay.
You're saying that's a collective. That's a group, right? Okay. There's nothing controversial by saying that's a group, okay? This broad definition, that's a group of people. But your definition of collectivist has baked into it this moral value that the group is greater than the individual. So when you say they were a collective, you're smuggling in that moral value from your collectivist definition. That smuggling in of that moral value and that narrow definition of collectivist is what I think is a rhetorical vice here.
I'm not sure
I think that is inaccurate.
I'm not sure if it's a moral value or standard of value, but I could ask you a different question. Could you describe what tribalism is to me? In your own words.
Well, when I hear the word tribalism, I think of in-group, out-group, and someone identifies these people as in my group and those other people as out of my group.
Okay, take tribalism, like, you know, what someone is outside my group, that does in tribalism, does the tribe matter more than does the tribe matter more? Like the concept of the tribe matters more than individuals. The tribe has to survive or succeed. If the tribe falls apart, the individuals in the tribe are exposed or vulnerable or something. Am I exaggerating, or is that more or less like what we can agree on?
I think that doesn't exhaust the case. What I think happens, this is like the fifth time I've tried to explain what I think happens. There are going to be moments where the tribe will take precedence, and there are going to be moments where the individual takes precedence. And that's a dynamic kind of flexible circular type of duty relationship. And it is not just one primacy in all cases and the other primacy in all cases.
Sure. So you're saying because it's like a mixture, then it's not necessarily collective and it's not an individual, it's just the way it is.
Well,
you can't categorize it because it's just a mixture.
No, I'm not saying we can't categorize it. I'm saying that the correct categorization is that it is a mixture of duties to the group and the group having duties to the individual, and the individual in some cases taking primacy and the group taking primacy in some cases. And it's up to our judgment to decide when to apply one or not.
Is it up to our judgment?
Yeah, that's what I said.
Because I think the point of collectivism and the point of duty is that it strips us of our judgment. Because if I say, kill that minority or kill that Jew right now because they're vermin or whatnot, then and it's your duty to the collective, we need to be protected, we need to be, I don't know, pure or whatnot, then do you start in that position of being very tribalistic? Do you then apply critical reasoning? Because I don't think critical thinking, because I don't think that's occurring when you kill someone that's a minority just because they're from a different group.
What? I don't understand what you're saying.
I'm saying that the concepts of collectivism and the concept of duty strip people of their critical thinking. That's kind of the idea. So if you're part of the group, or you're part of the tribe, and the leader of the tribe is telling you this group is exploiting us and attacking us, we need to protect ourselves from that, you would stop thinking, you would feel that you're obligated to the group, you have a duty to the group, you have to kill these other people in this other group to protect your group. The idea is that you're being manipulated in this sort of collectivism.
I don't think that's what happens in those cases.
You don't think that's what happens? So
no.
So if I think
that the individual has those racist attitudes, and then the individual is acting on those racist attitudes.
So you think that everyone? Okay, I'm thinking of whether
I don't think they're doing it in service of the community. I think that they legit believe that this person is vermin and they want to kill them.
Okay, so
I think that's the individual.
Would you say that if someone, so you wouldn't say that if someone protected the group, that isn't an altruistic behavior?
Relevance?
Duty to the group. Altruistic behavior
relevance?
To the group. Being manipulated by the leaders of the group to commit heinous acts.
Okay, I don't think that that's what happens, though. I don't think people are like manipulated like that. I don't think we're easily brainwashed. I think people have those beliefs.
Dude,
I think
are you
people
saying the concept of? Are you really going to tell me that the concept of tribalism doesn't exist and people like check out the rational thinking and act in a violent way?
That's not what I'm saying.
I am saying it.
Right, but what I'm saying that's a naive framing of what happens in human nature.
Okay,
what's occurring? Okay. Yeah. This is what I tried to tell you like an hour ago, and you wouldn't let me do it. So, humans, when we're born, we inherit a set of beliefs and values from the community we're born in. Okay?
Okay.
Those values that we inherit are things that we can accept or reject. There's a process of us reflecting and having critical reasoning over the values that we have. And this is particularly important in our adolescent period. That's when we sort of fight against the things that we were taught. And it's an important time for us to do that. So when we are an adult, we've settled on some of these things. That might change also as you go on and you get older. But you have these beliefs, and those beliefs are often shared with other people in your community. You identify your community by your shared beliefs. you do not just make them up out of nowhere. You don't just come to them through pure rationality. It's a combination of you have them, you think critically about them, you keep the ones you like.
Okay, so I would say
that is both individual and community interacting together. That's what
okay,
I think happens.
I appreciate the context. I would say that these ideas or these philosophies of tribalism and duty and be altruistic to your group, I think they're, if you accept those philosophies to some degree, I think you're switching off your critical thinking and doing what the leader of the group does. And I'll give you an example and let you decide if you think that's what happened. Okay? So
Okay.
Donald Trump on the 6th of January spoke in front of a crowd a bit outside the White House and told them they're stealing our election, they're robbing us. I'm not American, so I don't remember the whole context. They're stealing, they're robbing us. Go over there and stop them. Okay, people went there, they were angry, they were upset. They switched off, for argument's sake, or at least I'm arguing it, they switched off their critical thinking and they went to cause trouble. Donald Trump, let's say, riled up the crowd. Yeah. They went over there as the tribe that they are and caused trouble. We're acting rough or violent or not violent. I don't know what the position is by both sides, but please explain to me what you think happened.
Well,
in the context of collectivism and tribalism.
This group of people already had the shared value of injustice needs to be punished with violence. That's one value they had to start with.
Okay.
Then they were told there's injustice happening. And so they have an internal duty as individuals. They all share it in this community, but as individuals, they have this value that I need to physically stop injustice or physically punish injustice. That injustice has been pointed out to me. The person who pointed out to me is trustworthy. I'm going to go do this violence.
Okay, so let's change the situation slightly. If Donald Trump won the vote, but someone proved to these people that there was injustice, would they still have gone and attacked the White House?
What?
You're saying their belief of injustice was violated, and that's why they acted violent. So if the case was reversed, and Donald Trump had won the election, but he did it in an unjust way, and he tampered with the election, and they were presented evidence with this tampering, very, very clear evidence. Would they still have stormed the White House because the value of injustice had been broken? The value of justice had been broken.
I don't know. Probably. I would guess so. I mean, if they have the value, if the reason why they're doing the violence is because they have the value of punishing injustice, and don't they see this as an equal injustice, then yeah, I think they would do it.
Well, I think you're being ridiculous because they only care about their own group. They want their group to win.
All right, so we just disagree on what we think is happening with people.
That if Donald Trump had won and they were presented with evidence that he won unfairly, they would still storm the White House and say, no, we don't. Even though we really, really like Donald Trump, we want you to cancel the vote.
If they found out that Donald Trump had stole the election,
yep,
I think that would utterly change how they thought of Donald Trump. Yeah.
Sure, but I'm just presenting, would they still have acted violently and gone to the White House?
Yeah, because if Donald Trump had
you're not being honest. I don't think you're being honest.
Okay, this is mind reading. That's not motivating at all.
I think even okay, I'm going to leave it to the audience because I don't think that's being honest. Like, obviously they're tribal. If they were fed lies like in advance that Biden is going to cheat, that's the only way they can win. They're going to cheat. They're going to cheat. They're going to cheat, and then all these things happen. But if they had won, they would sit at home and celebrate.
But that's not the scenario you presented. The scenario you presented was, hey, Trump won, and they know that it was stolen in the same way that they thought Biden would steal it.
Yes. Trump had won, and he won unfairly.
And it was stolen in the same way, and they knew about it.
Yeah, the votes were something, or rather, I don't know what happened.
Right, and then if Trump is going to be the one who's going to be inaugurated, it seems to me like it just follows that if the reason why they're invading whatever is because it was stolen unfairly,
Yes,
and
but
then they found out it doesn't matter who the person who did it. I'm fairly sure that these militant patriots would do the same thing.
You've seen across the period of like a year and a half at the very least on the news that these political tribes flip their position on a deeply held belief on a Tuesday and a Thursday if it makes them win points. They don't care about the vast, they care about the tribe. Or am I just being blind? In general, like you don't see that happening right now in our culture?
I think people are mostly consistent with their positions. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're being ridiculous. But anyway, let's we understand the concept of tribalism. I'm happy with that.
Well, I need to go soon, but so we
You want
should
to pick
wrap
up
this up.
I'm sorry, I have some more points. Okay, I'll try to go. So I would say that Marxism and therefore socialism and communism deny political pluralism. You cannot have a situation in a country where you have people that are for communism and against it just as parties in the country. It denies them this option that necessarily means that you can only have like one party per se, and that's authoritarianism. You can both fascism literally states that, and communism Marxism says you can't have political pluralism.
What's the point of that to the proposition?
If you only, as a result of not being able to have political pluralism, you only have one party.
What's the point of that to the proposition?
Then you have
what is having one party? How does only being able to have one party mean that they're equally immoral?
Only having one party leads to the fact that you'll have authoritarian governments because it's just one party.
Right. So is your whole claim here that like they're both authoritarian, therefore they're equally immoral?
Well, I'm again building a case that they will have to be authoritarian. It's not the case that it's not the case that you can say in socialism that you can have, a party for socialism, a party for capitalism, and they both argue over no, you have to have complete socialism, and you can't have this sort of political pluralism. Therefore, you will only have one party. Therefore, you will have authoritarianism, and force will be there at some point. And yeah, the whole system is immoral as a result.
Okay, the same can be said about capitalism. You can't have socialism and capitalism.
But you
can only have capitalism.
Well, you have capitalism, and then you have people that constantly complain about capitalism, and they pass law to contradict capitalism, pass the mixed economy.
It doesn't matter who's complaining about capitalism here.
But they're allowed to exist.
You're just saying that these things are incompatible. Therefore, there has to be one party. Capitalism's incompatible with communism. Therefore, there can only be a capitalism. It seems to me like what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
But I'll easily debunk it, because you do have political pluralism in our democracies where you have some people that absolutely hate capitalism and constantly pass laws to reduce it. You have that.
Yeah, and Russia also had capitalists. There were capitalists in Soviet Russia who were pushing Russia to become more capitalist. And in fact, they won, and that's how Russia became capitalist.
The reason why the economic collapse of the USSR isn't this particular point. I think you're distracting from the point that Marxism doesn't allow political pluralism, and democracies do allow political pluralism. And if you don't have political pluralism, you necessarily have authoritarianism. There's no.
Well, I think I mean, as I said earlier, I think Western democracies
but like it's.
I'm not dancing around it. I just think that Western states are authoritarian too. They're authoritarian in different ways.
Yeah,
they're both authoritarian.
I would say, this pluralism. You have this mixture of socialism, this mixture of capitalism, this mixture of central planning, fascism that you even said to. So you have all this mixed situation, but they're all allowed to exist within democracy because you have this political pluralism, and they're all fighting each other. But it's not like one wins everything.
The Soviet Union was a democracy. That's what Soviets are. They're
you could say this.
Democratic.
You could say the same for China, but they still have just the one party.
Right. The democracy doesn't mean it's not totalitarian. Is the point?
But specifically, the thing didn't have political pluralism, right? It wasn't the case that you could have non-Marxist political parties or something like that. It was just the one party.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like we have one party in the United States too.
Okay. Would you agree that both socialism and fascism are anti-liberal? I think they state that outright. Anti-classical liberalism.
Yeah, it seems to me like by definition they are. I don't understand the relevance of this for forced use. I mean, I think we should go to closing statements. Like this is like you you're on all of these derails over and over again, and you fail to explain the relevance to me. I just want to move to closing statements and end this.
1 second. Can I just ask, with regards to the tribe,
can we move to closing statements?
I want to ask one question. With regards to tribalism, is it the case that people in the tribe, 4 people in the tribe, have one set of morals to how to behave between each other, but people in the tribe and how to behave to people to the opposing tribe have a different set of morals?
Sorry, what?
People in the tribe behave to one another under one set of morals, like behave nice, help them out, whatnot, and then people in that tribe against, when they see people from the opposing tribe, they have a different set of morals to apply to them because they're in a different tribe. Like attack them, hurt them, they're evil.
What's the question?
Do you agree?
Do I agree that people have different moral values for those in their group versus out of their group?
Yes, there's a set of moral principles that apply to in the tribe, and there's a different set of moral principles that applied from people in one tribe versus the opposing tribe. And this could be like,
that seems uncontroversial. Yeah.
Okay, but this could be like, in a, not between a country and another country, but between a race and another race, or between a class and another class.
I think that there's going to be norms within a group that are going to be different than those outside the group. I don't see any problem with that. What's your point?
Well, I mean, I was trying to do some research for this, and I think I have built the case that you have a situation where these principles lead to, at the very least, collectivist, if it's easier to understand, tribal groups. They view the opposing tribe as oppressive, as hurting them or stealing them or being unfair to them or whatnot. They are, I would add, but you won't agree, I would add, they are the chosen people. They should be in this situation. It's not fair that they are in this wrong position that they are at the moment. There isn't any political pluralism. It's just this group will control the whole country. It's anti-liberal, we mentioned, we mentioned we have a different set of moralities that apply for the tribe and the one that apply for a different tribe, meaning we can kill them. In a sense, we can kill them, it's okay, because they're our enemy. Even though, like,
that's not what that means. It means they could use that as justification, but having different norms doesn't necessarily entail that they're going to kill people.
The idea is, you see a human, this human has characteristics of your group, you act really nice to them. You see a human from another group, you say, oh, I'm going to attack them, they're evil, they're vermin, they're whatnot. Yeah, they don't deserve to live.
Do you understand what I'm saying here?
What's that?
Just having different norms between the groups doesn't mean that you'll kill them.
I think it's a different moral. Because they're so different, it's a different moral system that applies to them. Because you won't hit someone from your moral group. It's not a norm like, I normally shake hands and I normally throw a rock at this guy. This is like this person doesn't. I don't
think people are that violent. Usually, they're being violent because they feel like some injustice has been done and they have to punish it. Yeah,
injustice.
I think humans are often violent because they think that that there's some value guiding that, right? Like usually it's a moral case that's telling them to do it. It's not that the other group lacks some type of morality.
I'm sure there's a reason, and I'm sure that the reason is injustice.
Mm-hmm.
Some kind of the other group like oppressed our group in a particular way, and we need to protect. We have our duty to be altruistic to the group and protect it. I'm sure all those things apply, but as a result of those reasons, there's one set of laws for people inside your tribe, and one set of moral laws for people inside your tribe, and a different set of moral laws for people outside your tribe, which could mean shoot on sight.
It could, plausibly, but that's not. I don't understand. Like, okay, sure, in this abstract sense, we can have tribes that have these morals, like whatever. What does that have to do with the proposition? It's not
Everything,
motivating.
everything to do with the proposition. It's
All
complete.
it
It's
does, all
entirely.
it does is it just provides the story of like, okay, there's going to be different morals between the groups. And then these people, and then socialism creates that thing. That's the disagreement. You refuse to engage in the disagreement. Let's move to closing statements, please.
Sure, go ahead.
I want to go last.
Go ahead. I have to think of something.
I can give you a minute.
Okay,
Unless,
so
go
I,
ahead.
I don't really, I don't think we really got into like the heart of the matter in this debate. I would have liked to skip some of the pedanticness of the original statement and gone more at the heart of the matter. I was kind of hoping for feedback because feedback about these points that I'm raising, because I could have maybe changed my mind if we had like a different discussion. But from what I've seen, we didn't have that. So I would just say that I proved, in a sense, that both, let's say, socialism and fascism, that both had the what Karl Popper called the historicism and the chosen people effect. That both were collectivists. It is the case that because you don't have political pluralism in either system, that you will have a one-party system, therefore authoritarian system. They're both anti-liberal, so they don't like the concepts of individual. The tribe is more important, and things that I've described. And because like they're opposing tribe, then it's, if you are a dutiful person to the tribe, you would protect it from those evil people. You would attack them. You would switch off your rational behavior, which this tribalistic kind of behavior we're seeing at the moment to some degree in other parts of the world, not in this same context, but it is a known psychological occurrence. So, for example, but specifically for it to be psychological, it's called mass formation or crowd formation, or where the crowd like kind of like has this mass psychosis where they are not thinking rationally. So you could say like they were crowd formation. Well, I'll leave that for a moment. But there are these explanations in psychology. I have given some some philosophical explanation. And as far as I can see, I mean, it's still the fact that millions of people died, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people died under these systems. Is it the case that they could be reformed on either side if you remove the element of force? That could be something we could have discussed, but it seems to me that it is the case that this political system, meaning A, resulted to B, resulted to C. And I am happy that people acknowledge that these things already at the start, we acknowledge that these things can happen again if we, under the same conditions, let it happen again. So socialists, for example, are trying to find other ways of making this happen. They haven't yet succeeded, but they're at least acknowledging that this system under these conditions is A equals B equals C, hundreds of people, hundreds of millions, tens of millions of people dying. And I hope I've proved that. That's my statement.
Okay. So the proposition is about force for equality versus force for supremacy. The framework is picking out this difference between Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia, for example. We both agree that there was mass death in both cases. Where we disagree is on the causal narrative of the mass death. For Philo, the mass death is because of this collectivist belief that the group has primacy over the individual. Both of these systems share this collectivist belief. The leaders in power are able to use these beliefs that the collective has in order to justify these acts of violence, like the Holocaust, like the Holodomor, like the gulags, things like that. Okay. I pointed out that in these causal stories, one of the causal stories is much stronger. the causal story of racial supremacy is a much stronger case that leads us to the reason why the Holocaust was justified, why there was mass killings of those of a quote unquote inferior race. I do not believe that, by the way, or inferior abilities, etc. Versus this causal story of trying to get rid of the economic system that exploits the proletariat in order to have a more just society. That causal story leading to the Holodomor is less strong. Just to give you an example about why the Holodomor is less strong than racial supremacy leading to racial cleansing, these famines that happened in Russia happened over and over and over again. This was something that was very cyclical in Russia's history. It happens, it's a cycle that occurred many, many times with millions of people dying in the past. Yes, the Holodomor was worse than it was in other time periods. Part of that is that the drought was worse than other time periods. Part of that also was the policies of the government. But those policies that were made there were not reacted or changed quickly enough after they saw that the problems were happening. Those things that happened in the Holodomor weren't caused in the same way that the racial cleansing of the Holocaust was caused intentionally. Because of that difference of the causal narrative, we can say one is worse than the other. I take it that an intentional, deliberate act of cleansing a racial minority from a country is worse morally than being faced with a catastrophic weather disaster plus these bad policies that they didn't realize were bad, digging their heels in and not reacting fast enough. Ignorance versus deliberate action, I think, and it's not totally ignorance in Russia's case. There were some examples of it being enforced for longer than it should have been. But the point here is that this deliberate walking towards one conclusion versus finding yourself in this shitstorm and then not reacting fast enough, those are different causal stories. And one we could say is more immoral than the other. That's basically my claim here. That this is a closing statement. So in the case of socialism, the causal story is much more weakly connected to those excess deaths than in the case of Nazism, where the causal story is directly and deliberately linked to the mass killing of these minorities and those with disabilities.